Good morning, dear guests, Minister Miščević, Your Excellencies. Welcome to the Policy Forum, Tackling State Capture in Southeast Europe, Delivering on the European Rule of Law Promise. Please be seated. The Policy Forum is about to commence. Before the program starts, I would like to mention that the European Policy Center takes care about the environment and is trying to save trees. Therefore, we would like to inform you that program agenda, biographies of panelists, and evaluation form is available on the QR code available here on this wall and on your accreditations. You can access the agenda, panelist biographies, and evaluation form that we kindly ask you to fill out at the end of the event. If you are accessing the QR code via smartphone, panelist biographies can be previewed by clicking on the speaker's name.
Now we would like to invite our honored speakers to deliver the opening remarks in the following order. Mr. Ruslan Stefanov, Program Director at the Center for Study of Democracy. Ms. Tanja Miščević, Minister of European Integration of Serbia. His Excellency Jørn Eugene Gjelstad, Ambassador of the Kingdom of Norway to Serbia. His Excellency Christopher Hill, Ambassador of the United States of America to Serbia, and Mr. Srđan Majstorović, Chairman of the Governing Board of the European Policy Center, SEP Belgrade.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I've been told I need to be as short as possible, so let me just start by saying that I want to focus on corruption as a vulnerability and a security risk for Southeast Europe. Let me start by thanking our hosts from CEP, from the Center for European Policy in Belgrade. Srđan, Milena, the whole team, thank you so much for making this happen. And of course, our colleagues from the Southeast European Leadership for Development and Integrity. And the platform we're trying to do, we're trying to engage governments in the region to restart the anti-corruption reform all across Southeast Europe, EU and non-EU members included. Let me also say thank you to our colleagues from the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative who have been very, very helpful in this effort and endeavor, and of course the Regional Cooperation Council who are part of our platform. Now, I was talking before the beginning to some people around, and we always have to start by acknowledging the huge progress the region has made. Okay? I mean, looking back at 2000, it's really wonderful to see the sea change we've seen in the past 20 plus years. But at the same time, we need to note that somewhere along the way in 2016, we lost steam. And we're here in the hope that we are going to regain this steam. We are presenting the second Good Governance report for Southeast Europe, which I hope everyone will get a copy. And we're looking into two of the most potent tools for anti-corruption in the region. That's asset declarations and public procurement. But let me just note on the title, State Capture and Tackling State Capture, that we look at that as a concentration of power. And that means we need to focus, we need to know that it's not an end state, anti-corruption. It's a process that we'll always be facing. There is no democracy in the world that doesn't face the issue of corruption and state capture. And that means decomposed, that means concentration of power in the market or on the market sector or on the public sector. So we always have to be vigilant. I mean, these are parts of the checks and balances that we need to create constantly. So if there is too much power in the private sector, you're likely to get state capture. If there is too much power for too long concentrated in one place in the public sector, you're likely to get state capture. So getting that decomposed is one of our primary goals, and we've designed the tools, the metrics that hopefully can help us do that. And let me finish by saying that hope is always around, help is always around. The war in Ukraine, the brutal Russian war in Ukraine, has been a wake-up call, but it's also turned corruption into a security issue that we must know. If we are to be a family together, we must know that the weakest links would be the ones that would define the future of the whole family. So we need to make sure that we make this family secure together. And let me just say of two issues that are about to happen in this year. One is we're very happy that the US is kind of back in the region more assertively, and particularly USAID, but also the Summit for Democracy. And I'm also happy to say that the Bulgarian Ministry of Justice seems to be working with us, hopefully. We'll be inviting all of you in March in Sofia to try to do something under that umbrella on anti-corruption in the region. And secondly, the EU is getting its act together. Again, this is not about single countries in the region. We face this issue together, and the EU is preparing its anti-corruption package. We hope to get it this year, and we hope that it will be strong and it will help us move the needle forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stefanov. And now let me call Ms. Tanja Miščević, Minister of European Integration of Serbia, to deliver her opening remark. Thank you.
Dobro jutro, but good morning, this time in English. It is my great pleasure to be here with you, not only because I am invited by very good friends, being CEP, that we cooperate for ages, if not decades, but also to discuss about the plans to tackle the issue that is the topic of today's discussion. It's definitely the fight against corruption, or fighting with the corruption, but also wider concept of the rule of law. I will remind you, and I will start always reminding all of us, that the rule of law and the changes which rule of law reforms bring into the life of each and every of us, citizens of Serbia, is the most important element of the European integration transformation process. And that is something that we all have to have on our minds when talking about the issue. Where are we today, and what are the plans in terms of dealing with the reforms in terms of rule of law? First of all, we are now very close to start the procedure within the parliament on the implementation on the constitutional amendments, which will change the very basics of the appointment of the judges and the prosecutors. But we are also not neglecting other parts, and the fight against corruption is the second one of the importance, or the same level of the importance. So we are now doing, and there is a working group that has been established by the Ministry of Justice, and it's not only intersectoral, which means all the institutions of the government of Serbia participating, but also including the civil society organizations representatives and the professional association, of course, representatives, to talk how to create a modern strategy fighting against corruption in terms of having not only the possibility to have the preventive way of acting, but also punitive measures. That means to include much more of this in terms of being as effective as it possible. Saying that doesn't mean that we are now not operating in accordance with the plans. There are operational plans for several of the sectors which find to be the most affected by the corruption. Last but not least, let me remind you also the role of the fight against corruption in the new negotiating methodology. So it's not only situated in one part of one chapter of one action plan with the several of the closing benchmarks, but it's become horizontal. That is now part of the cluster fundamentals, which is extremely important cluster, the first one to be open, the last one chapters to be closed, of course, but focusing on anti-corruptive measures, which will be included almost in all or each and every of the other chapters of the negotiation process. That is what we have to have in mind when preparing for both opening and closing chapters. And last thing that I would like to tackle is the cooperation with the civil society organization in terms of fighting with corruption, or better to say, in boosting the reforms in the rule of law sector. That is something that we started back in 2013 with creating the National Convention for the European Union, which means a very strong and, I would say, resilient instrument of civil society overseeing the work in the negotiation process. Resilient in terms that it is my astonishment to see that after 3 years not being in Serbia, I saw the importance but also the strength of the National Convention. Only a few days ago we had a very good discussion on the law, on police, because the civil society organizations were very vocal that they are not comfortable with some of the solutions. And the other side listen, the comments and the concerns. That is the way that we are going to continuously cooperate in not only reforming the rule of law, not only fighting against corruption, but in all reform agenda of this country. Thank you very much for the invitation. I wish you a very successful exchange today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miščević. We would now like to invite His Excellency Jørn Eugene Gjelstad, Ambassador of Kingdom of Norway to Serbia, to deliver his opening remarks.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all being present here. Honorable Minister of European Integration, Tanja Miščević, US Ambassador Hill, Excellencies and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. A big thank to you, Ruslan, and the Center for Study of Democracy for inviting me to say some words at this opening of this important conference. And also thank to you, Minister Miščević, for a very inspiring speech. And let me also express my gratitude to Ambassador Hill and the United States for a strong engagement and support for the rule of law and the anti-corruption agenda in this region, as well as to Srđan, Majstorović, and the European Policy Center, our long-standing partner in this and many other projects here in Serbia. It is encouraging to see the great turnout today, which reflects an increasing interest in and commitment to the rule of law and anti-corruption agenda. And I'm also particularly pleased with the strong participation from all over Southeast Europe and the diversity of the participants being present, ranging from elected representatives, governmental officials, policy experts, and civil society from the region as well as from the broader international community. And while this conference will basically focus on the challenges ahead, I think it's also important to reflect a bit on progress and achievements that have been made so far, because there have been improvements. Ruslan said that some of the steam of this important issue has been lost, and if that is the case, Ruslan, we should all make collective efforts to regain that steam. I think that should be our aim. And Norway stands ready to support the countries of this region in taking further measures that would be important for making their societies more functional and more conducive to economic growth and prosperity. Legislation and regulatory frameworks and oversights are key, but these kinds of initiatives need to be implemented and translated into concrete action if they are to serve any purpose. Rule of law and good governance are cornerstones in building democratic societies based on transparency, accountability, and trust. And this represents fundamental European values, as we know. By nature, any development of a value and rule-based societal order is a continuous process and must constantly relate to changing circumstances and new challenges. It represents a continuum and goes beyond ticking off boxes or meeting specific benchmarks. And with this in mind, I think it makes perfect sense that this regional project focuses on both EU member states and candidate countries which are aspiring for membership, because the challenges are the same for all of us, and common challenges can more easily be overcome successfully by shared experiences and joint efforts. The creation of the Regional Good Governance Public-Private Partnership Platform, one of the deliverables from the project, is therefore, as far as I can see it, a most promising step in the right direction. From a Norwegian perspective, we look at transparency and independent institutions as a make or break criteria for a successful development of a society. This is key for a sustained economic growth, for social welfare, and not at least for the level of trust. Trust building between the citizens and their institutions is imperative for a society to function properly. And in this regard, the citizens need to experience progress on transparency, a significant reduction in discretionary powers, and a corresponding increase in predictability, increased efficiency and supervisory bodies, as well as relevant control mechanisms, effective measures to identify and report on corruption on all levels, as well as the political will to improve the ethical culture. For business, predictable framework conditions include a leveled playing field. This is risk reducing, and by that, domestic and international investors can more easily be mobilized for important economic activities. Trust in institutions, their independency and effectiveness are key requirements for any economy to improve and prosper. And if the society is not able to deliver on this, investments and jobs can easily go elsewhere. This is an important point to reflect upon by any government that would like to offer major opportunities for growth and employment in new and expanding green industries. And in this way, good governance and a predictable business framework will serve as the very baseline for reaping big dividends for countries that get their clean energy industrial strategies right. Conversely, I believe we should also look at the current sociological and economic research on the dynamics of the depopulation phenomenon. These reports claim that the combination of corruption, weak institutions, and low-quality public services is the driving force behind the outward migration of young, highly educated people. This loss of brain trust is an alarming trend for those societies affected. And for the coming decade, this issue stands out as the most challenging economic and fiscal issue for the Central and Eastern European countries. In other words, rule of law, good governance, and anti-corruption are not only normative principles reflecting sound values and good moral. This is just as much about rational economic interests of any country that will significantly increase and sustain its own economic performance. At this point, I would like to underline that the issue of good governance and rule of law is a multi-sectorial phenomenon, and improvements in this respect requires engagement from the whole society. Elected representatives, public authorities, the business community, as well as the civil society itself. However, governments and authorities have the main responsibility for creating the normative framework that make rule of law and good governance possible. And in addition, the authorities need the enforcement capacities required, as well as the political will to take use of their relevant instruments in a decisive way. In that connection, it is important to develop both the right methodology and credible strategy to move towards the declared goal in a systematic way, because citizens need to know whether public authorities have taken the necessary measures, whether these measures have led to any positive change, or whether even more proactive initiatives should be planned and should be implemented. So it is therefore key that Serbia adopts a new strategy for fighting corruption, which is planned for June this year. Such a strategy will be a very important instrument in fighting corruption for the longer term in this country and can serve also as a model for the rest of this region. On this background, I'm therefore happy to see representatives from key institutions like the Agency for Prevention of Corruption, the courts, and national and local governments participating in the panels today, together with relevant representation from civil society. Engaging, discussing, and working together is certainly the recipe for further progress. Finally, I will underline the important role that the civil society has to play in keeping rule of law and good governance on the political agenda. We need devoted people to monitor the work of governments and institutions, as well as raising their voices whenever necessary. Being a watchdog of good democratic practice is not always very popular. I'm sure many here have experienced that. But such a role is key if we are to achieve the much-needed progress. Acknowledging this crucial role, the Norwegian government is supporting the civil society across the Western Balkan 6 region through our regional Smart Balkan program, which was launched last year. And in addition, we cooperate with civil society in most of the EU member states through our extensive funding schemes, the Norway grants. The goal with all these initiatives is to contribute to a more equal, more democratic, and a more transparent Europe, both socially and economically, and this project is no exception. So, last famous word, I wish you every success in your deliberations throughout the day, and we are looking forward to follow your discussions with great interest. So, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Gjelstad, for your speech. And now I would like to invite His Excellency Christopher R. Hill, Ambassador of the United States of America to Serbia, to deliver his opening remarks. Please.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for inviting me to this very important conference, the opening of this conference. It's a great honor for me to be here. It's a great honor to be here with Minister Miščević, who I think is, there's no better expert in the world on these kinds of issues than Minister of European Integration. And it's always a pleasure to be here with the Ambassador of Norway. Jørn, I have to tell you, there's no better friend of the United States in Europe than Norway. We do everything together. And, I think tomorrow we'll be discussing another thing, energy. As we care about Serbia's energy issue, Norway is already well onto it. So it's always a great pleasure to work with you, especially on issues when Norway gets to work on something, they do it. They don't talk about it, they just do it. So it's a great pleasure to be here, to be invited to this. It's also, I'm very honored to be here at something that is hosted in part by the Center for Study of Democracy. Director Stefanov, I almost turned you into a Serb, not Stefanov, not Stefanović, but, and of course the European Policy Center led by Srđan Majstorović. So I think you've got everybody here that you need to have here in order to discuss this issue of such existential importance to this country and many other countries. If you go back to the founding fathers in the United States, the effort to devise our Constitution back in the 18th century, what were they worried about? They were worried about issues of state capture, of corruption. They're worried about separation of powers. They're worried about trying to make sure that there was a good division of responsibility, that no one was able to take too much power. So this issue has been around for hundreds of years. And certainly, I think for Serbia today, it takes on an added importance because just as the President again said the other night, Serbia is on a journey toward the European Union. And of course, I think the European Union has correctly identified the issue of transparency, of rule of law, fighting corruption as one of the central themes in any country's journey into the European Union. But I think in Serbia's case, it's been a transition that for many people in Serbia has gone on for many years, decades really. It's not just about entering the European Union, it was about exiting something else. It was about exiting a system that grew up in the wake of World War II, system that even today no one quite entirely understands what self-management was all about. I mean, terms like osnovne organizacije, družine rade, people are still wondering what that was all about. So I think for Serbia, for people in Serbia, it's been a long journey of transition, of meeting new concepts, of trying to meet new standards, different standards, and ultimately of trying to do the best thing for its citizens. Because it's not that you're entering the European Union and you will get there, you will get there. It's not just that is the motivation, it's its own motivation, because corruption, it goes to the foundation of what a society is, what needs to be done in a society. Whether you're joining something or not joining something, you need to have this clear, this consensus in the country that you've got to take care of these problems. And as I said before, this is not unique to Serbia. You know, Serbia is a country that's unique. It has a very unique history, to be sure, but not all its problems are unique. And that's a good thing, because you can learn from others. I mean, every country has had to deal with this issue. President Biden has called the fight against corruption one of the defining challenges of our era. Corruption has robbed citizens of economic opportunity, equal access to vital services, whether it's health care or education. It exacerbates inequality and contributes to brain drain, people saying, I've had enough, I'm leaving. And yet, I think even more fundamentally, it weakens people's resolve, it weakens people's capacity to say, we can do better. Because when a problem has lingered for many years, people begin to think, it's always going to be with us, like bad weather in January. So I think it's very important for us all to get together and try to address what can be done, with the understanding it's a long fight and it's going to require many years ahead. But what it really needs to require is that everyone understand this is wrong, we've got to fix this. I think the United States has tried to be very active here since 2001. I don't know why we start this in 2001, but we have actually spent about $440 million in the fight against corruption and improving Serbia's democratic and judicial institutions. Someday historians will look and say, was that money well spent? Did it work? And I think one has to be careful about taking an accountant view of all the money, as important as that is, because I think we also need to take the view that this is a tough problem. In human history, thousands of years, no one has ever totally solved this problem. Maybe Norway's an exception, but the rest of us have not solved this problem. And so we're going to have to try to work on different things. Some things work better than other things. And one should not just focus on the things that didn't work, try to focus on the things that have worked. And I think in particular, one of the themes that a number of our speakers have said today is, let's look at some of the progress that's been made and let's be emboldened. Let's kind of renew our spirit of optimism when we see the progress that's being made. And so let's not give up. And I think it's very important, especially for young people who may be looking at saying, you know, I'm tired of listening to my parents talk about this. I know they were tired of listening to their parents talk about this. I'm done with this. And they start looking elsewhere. In fact, Serbia has a tremendous natural resource in its young people. There's very tech-savvy people. I don't understand it all, but they're into it. That's very clear. And I think this younger generation is absolutely worth preserving in this country so that they can take this country forward. And I think we all know that what they expect is to see more transparent, more even playing field. They expect to see real opportunities here, and opportunities are provided best when you win the fight or do better in the fight against corruption. So I want to just thank you once again for being, you know, I had a really long speech here, and as is often the case, I start thinking about other things, and before you know it, I've ignored the text, but I think you got the point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your inspiring speech, Mr. Hill, Your Excellency. And now I would like to invite Mr. Srđan Majstorović, Chairman of the Governing Board of the European Policy Center, to deliver his opening remarks. Thank you.
Madam Minister, Your Excellencies, dear Ruslan, dear Commissioner who is here with us for equality, dear friends and colleagues. My colleagues also prepared me a long speech, and I decided to skip it because we robbed you out of 10 minutes of our time. But I would really like to thank all of you for, first of all, recognizing the importance of the topic, supporting, in the sense of Norwegian aid, but also necessity of all of us to meet and to discuss this issue, which is not easy. This issue goes very deep into the essence of capacities of Serbia to address certain problems that are becoming systemic. And these are topics that we should not be afraid of communicating and discussing. This is very important for the sake of the future of this country. I would be very short in my address because we have a pressing agenda in front of us, and I would just like to raise a couple of issues. One is the fact that Europe is at the watershed moment after the aggression of Russia to Ukraine. And this remarkable moment, this state of emergency for the continent, requires solidarity. And I'm happy to say that Serbia is gaining a support coming and based on the basis of the principle of solidarity. But this solidarity must also be based on trust and integrity. And these are extremely important phenomenons, very important things to be addressed at this moment. The governments who do not have integrity to respond in a proper way in addressing the challenges that they are facing cannot be recognized as a credible and trustworthy partners. And this is why it is so important to recognize the problem that we are facing here when we talk about the phenomenon of state capture, and to address these issues in order to prove that we are trustworthy and that integrity of this country will be a positive basis for solidarity and cooperation with our European and Western partners. Situation in Serbia is rather concerning when it comes to fight against corruption and the elements which have been recognized as those constituting the phenomenon of the captured state. The checks and balance system is under serious constraints, and the division of power is very questionable when you see how the political system reacts on the challenges that Serbia is facing. Another issue is the role of regulatory bodies and independent bodies, which are usually struggling with the capacities in order to perform their duties in the best possible way, and they need to be supported. And finally, there is a serious and long-term, I would say, risk of the fact that we are, by living in a country which is based on where the phenomenon of captured state is present, that we are creating a very dangerous political culture for the future, where our youth that Ambassador was referring to is recognizing that their development potential or the opportunities for them have been arrested, and they're seeking to respond to these risks by simply leaving the country. But I completely agree with what Ruslan stated at the beginning, and Ambassador later confirmed, and this is that we need to believe in hope. There is a hope. We only need political willingness to engage, and we need capacities to address these issues. And for the sake of capacities, I would finish by saying how important the capacities of civil society organizations are. This is the initiative of a regional group of civil society organizations, and we would like to be recognized as partners. I'm very happy and very glad that Minister Miščević is here, because this is a sign of a small changes which are happening. It was not previously a custom that we have ministers at events like this, and this opens a completely new door for communication and for dialogue with the government. So, Ms. Miščević, thank you very much for that. But when talking about capacities, there is another aspect that needs to be addressed, and this is perhaps the bravest part of our society at this moment, together with the civil society activists, and these are media and these are journalists. Without free media, without their capacity and ability to address issues of corruption, without a fear, without a pressure, without a scare that their names might be here in the national parliament, it is impossible to change this political culture that we are slowly but surely accepting. So my message for the end is positive. Opportunities should be discussed. Opportunities are there. And obviously, when discussing these issues of concern, we must be led by the hope, not by imaginary threats and potential losses or imaginary enemies, but rather to be very open, frank, and to address what is required. And I think, Ambassador, what you said could also be a slogan, and I will finish with that, of this conference. You said, we can do better. And I think this is true. This country has a potential, this country has a capacity. The only thing that we are missing perhaps at this moment, although hoping that things are changing, is the political willingness to address these issues and engage in a dialogue. I'll finish here by saying big thank you once again to all of you who came here, and especially to thank Andrea, Anessa, Milica, Miloš, all of these people whom you see and you don't see, but who stand behind the organization of this event. So thank you very much.